Honorable members, pray be seated. The Senate now resumes. Honorable members, when we took the adjournment, we were about to have introduced the Mutual Exchange of Information on Taxation Matters Amendment. I think that's where we are now. Senator, the Honorable Winston Garvey.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to introduce for first reading a bill for an act shortly entitled Mutual Exchange of Information on Taxation Matters, Bill 2017.
An act to amend the Mutual Exchange of Information on Taxation Matters Act, Chapter 202D, shortly entitled Mutual Exchange of Information on Taxation Matters Amendment Bill 2017.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the relevant standing orders of the Senate be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting.
Members, the question is that this bill, Mutual Exchange of Information on Taxation Matters Amendment Bill 2017, that the standing orders be suspended to allow the said bill to be taken through all of its stages at this sitting. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Senator Garvey.
Mr. President, I beg to move the second reading of the bill.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that bill be read a second time. Senator Garvey.
Mr. President, this bill seeks to amend the Mutual Exchange of Information on Taxation Matters Act, Chapter 202D. This amendment is in keeping with the agreement Grenada has signed to annually and automatically exchange tax information with some 88 other member states. Grenada has agreed to enact this legislation to implement the FATCA and the CRS no later than June 30th, 2017. So we are here today, Mr. President, to bring into law this very important piece of legislation which the country has committed to over a year ago. We will all agree that this piece of legislation is in keeping with modern trends. And we will all agree that should we not comply to this agreement, it will have grave consequences for this our country. An important feature in this bill, Mr. President, it is a mutual exchange of information. We have seen similar type legislation prior to this one, Mr. President, where we were required to submit information to foreign jurisdictions, but they were not required to submit to us, even if we request. But in this piece of legislation, it is mutually agreed. So if Grenada is requested to submit information, tax information on various citizens, we likewise can request information on citizens elsewhere from those jurisdictions. So what we have realized, Mr. President, that unlike other pieces of legislation, this one I will consider to be a more friendlier one. Mr. President, the country can request, as you said, information about Grenadians from all of the other 88 participating states. And in this light, This mutually agreed tax information will be submitted to a central and mutual electronic address by each of the 88 participating states. The information will be then stored, and the relevant pieces of information for particular states will be forwarded to each of these states. For Grenada, the competent authority that is responsible for the collection of information is the controller. And the authority is vested in the controller of Inland Revenue to ensure that all informations are collected, but most importantly, they are secured. And when the time is right, that information is submitted to the participating states who may have made the request. So it is in this regard, Mr. President, that I want to formally present some bits of the bill itself. It said Clause 5 seeks to amend Section 16 of the Principal Act to insert additional provisions relating to the obligations of persons in Grenada to provide the competent authority, the controller of Inland Revenue, with the requisite information. In this regard, Mr. President, the controller has been given the power to get the tax information from Grenadians. So as we've said, the controller is required to collect those information and so make them available if it is being requested by any of those parties we have signed to in this agreement, and I've said 88 states. Section 6, Mr. President, insertion of a new section 17A to the Principal Act. And what it says, it talks here about costs. Incidents of costs incurred in providing assistance shall be agreed between Grenada and the scheduled country or the party to the scheduled agreement concerned with any particular request for information. So in this regard, both states will agree as to if there is cost. They will agree as to how much and how that cost will be taken care of. But what we do know, if the cost here it costs our citizens, the foreign state would not be, or should not in any way impose a higher cost to our citizens for the same information. The point here, there is an agreement where both parties will work together and beforehand establish how they will move forward in terms of cost. Clause 7 seeks to amend the Principal Act, Mr. President, to insert a new part that facilitates the implementation of the CRS, which is a common reporting standard, including the power of the minister to make regulations to further the CRS. This will harmonize the way the report is submitted. The mutual exchange of information is also a requirement of Transparency International. Mr. President, so much has been said about our doing business report. So much has been said about our ranking in terms of transparency. What we do know, in as much as this is a requirement as to their rating countries in terms of your openness in dealing with issues, this here will put us in good stead. by passing this legislation today. But remember, as I've said, when we signed on to this agreement over a year ago, we agreed that by the 30th of June, we'll bring into law this mutually exchange tax bill. And we're pretty close to the deadline. But I'm happy that we are doing it at this point in time. Mr. President, it's important to know that country will get information on the residents who have businesses in other countries and who found it difficult to get tax information on them. We understand why, and I heard a lot been said of this FATCA. Why is it? And so much been said that it's going to cost this country so much because the banks and others will have to put into place the equipment to ensure that they're efficient in the supply of those information. And who will bear this cost? Of course it's the state. But on the flip side, we're saying if we don't do it, your country can be blacklisted and put additional pressure on your economy. So there is a requirement that you have to get it done, but we know there's going to be a cost. But what he's saying here, a lot been said that other jurisdictions do it because their citizens have decided to invest in other countries through the CBI and the others and so on, and they're moving money away from America and the likes. So these pieces of legislation has found itself into our domain so that a parent country can track their doing, track their businesses, and ensure that they pay the requisite tax to the jurisdiction. That may be the case. It may be so. But the point here is, this piece of legislation now gives these countries the opportunity to get information from the participating states on those persons with private businesses elsewhere. I know a lot been said about the Panama Papers and the likes and so forth and so on. And we've seen some countries being faced with steep penalties for not complying to the regulations. By us putting this into law today, Mr. President, is ensuring that we go one step further in protecting this economy. One step further in ensuring that Grenada comply with the international regulations, and we are seen in this regard as one of the model economies, the model country that respect laws, obey laws, respect institutions and the likes. So, we have to do this. We have to ensure that we conform. And with all the complaints I've heard on the outside that this could be onerous, yes, it may be so, Mr. President. Yes, it might be another burden. It may be so. But we want to ensure that we do everything to protect this economy. I want to look at section 20 here. Subsection 20, he said, and that is information and returns by financial institutions. Every reporting financial institution shall collect and report certain information in respect to certain financial accounts as specified by regulation made under this part. A reporting financial institution that fails to make a return in the manner and in accordance with the prescribed in accordance with the time prescribed under this act is liable of a penalty of $5,000 for such failure and a penalty of $2,000 for each month or part thereof that the failure continues. So our institutions or banks and the likes, maybe credit unions and so forth, they are required to submit information. And if they fail to do that, there is a penalty. But as law-abiding citizens and institutions, we will ensure that we provide information in time. So there will be no need to be fined. because ever so often we see in law there is a penalty for violation, and people often look at the penalty up front and thinking that it is draconian and the likes and so on. But we're saying comply with the rules and there is no need for the penalty. On the other hand, you might be saying the penalty is there as a deterrent. So people know that if they fail to file their return in time, it will cost them probably, well in this case, $5,000 and $2,000 per month every time it continues, meaning that they fail to submit the return. But you don't have to get to that point. Just make sure you pay it in time. Or submit the information in time. So this, Mr. President, as I said, is 88 countries that is participating in this. This is, as we realize in recent times, the modern trend, that every country is trying to ensure that the citizens who take up residence elsewhere making a fair share of contribution to the home state. Grenada, by all means, we want to ensure that we comply to all the regulations that we have signed out there. And for this, Mr. President, I want to commend this bill for its second reading.
Question is, the bill be read a second time? Senator Dialli.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did not intend to speak on this, but after hearing the mover of the bill, I decided I should stand. And, Mr. President, you know, the mover of the bill made it sound as though we're doing this because, boy, this is the best thing to do for Grenada and it's the right thing to do. Please, it is not. Right? We're doing this because we have no choice in the matter. And the reality is, Mr. President, is that, as he said, there is additional costs for doing these things and providing this information by all our financial institutions. And the cost gets channeled on to who? The average citizen. Through what? Fees and other stuff. If you go to a bank now and request a financial, a bank statement, as all of us have to be doing now for Integrity Commission, if you're doing it for 12 months, it costs you $400 plus for 12 months to get it done. You understand? So it is not cheap when we talk about that and getting this information. And when you talk about the bill, talks about costs. The cost is between the competent authority who is handling this and for the state and the state requesting. It doesn't say anything about how the financial institution, the one that have to provide the proprietary information, is going to be compensated. So in the regulations, which this bill provides for, I hope that my friends on the other side would look at some way in the regulations to see how we could work out an arrangement with the financial institutions to help them to alleviate costs. Because let's be absolutely clear, Mr. President. If I, as I said before on a previous matter dealing with factor, when you have to talk about who controls what, to open an account in Grenada in any financial institution requires extensive paperwork because we have to comply with anti-money laundering and terrorist financing legislation. We have to set up compliance departments. We have to do a number of things. You could walk into a bank in Miami and open an account with 2 pieces of ID and you're good to go. You can get a credit card in less than a week. You can't do that in a jurisdiction like ours. And yet still, they threaten us with corresponding banking facilities. So we're doing all of that. And we put in all this law and all this thing. And when it comes now to corresponding banking relationships, they're pulling it back from us because they're saying what? Our jurisdiction's soft in terms of legislation and what we have and what we don't have. And we open to all kind of funny financing coming into our jurisdiction. Even criticize the CIB program. They even criticize that and said the funding coming through that could be all kind of terrorist financing and other stuff because they figure the vetting is weak. Again, Mr. President, I say that this is a big stick approach and let us not fool anybody about that. We're doing it because we have a choice. All I'm saying is that if we have to do it, as we have to, because they go blacklist us as the mover of the bill rightfully pointed out, let us see how we can recover some costs. Help our institutions that have to put in the necessary computer and software and so on, and the paper to generate. Even though the other bills speak about electronic transfer of information, but you still have to put standards in place and so on. So let us hope the regulations could cover some of these things that can help, so that at the end of the day, the cost will get transferred to the ordinary man on the street. Because that is what will happen with all of these things coming into place. So let us not, and when we go to negotiate and talk about what they're doing us with correspondent banking and all those kind of things, let us let them know that we have more legislation as their request than them themselves. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Diani. Senator the Honorable Nolan Cox.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would like to take this opportunity to give my full support to the amendment of the Mutual Exchange of Information and Taxation Matters Bill 2017. Mr. President, I want to start off by saying that it is clear, we understand that we are living in a global village. We reside in a global village, and also we reside and conduct business in one economic space. And as such, by doing business within this environment, there are certain requirements that we must adhere to. The world has gotten very small, and maybe we are to blame the advent of technology for that, how quickly information can travel with the blink of an eye for that happening. But this is where we are. But I support this bill because of this village, this economic space that we conduct business in. Sometimes it's difficult to ward off some of the challenges that may face countries like Grenada as regards to maybe fraud, corruption, even from outside. Because it is very important to understand the impact of these activities, these illegal activities. Some people take it lightly, but it has a substantial effect on one's economy. My colleague on the other side indicate costs. Costs, yes, costs are going to be incurred for monitoring legislations like this and the activities of persons. But I can assure you, the cost for not doing anything would far outweigh the costs that we use for monitoring and setting up these things. Because corruption and fraud, if not monitored, can be very dangerous. Even when it's monitored, you still can't even measure the impact of it, the impact that it has on your economy, especially economy like ours, especially when we're dealing with a currency in a small space. Those activities can seriously damage your economy if not properly monitored. So yes, it might have some setback for us in terms of infrastructure, in terms of training, in terms of bringing our business community and the nation as a whole up to speed. But it's important that we do that because it helps us to protect ourselves as well. It's some measure of defense for ourselves in this village. Because some of the larger countries, they have more resources, they have better facilities, they have better technology. They can do things quicker and faster than us. And so if we don't have any measure to protect ourselves, I believe that it can be very destructive for us. So within this context, I lend my support to this amendment because I think that it's important to have some sort of a monitoring take place and to understand it's in a global village that we operate in. If something happened in Europe, like for example Brexit, even election results in those countries impact us. It impacts markets, impact how people trade, how people invest. And so you see, it's a very small space. The world has become small, and we have to understand and learn and start to adapt to it. So with this, I want to commend my support to this measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Cox. Honorable members, the question is, did the bill be read a second time?
Mr. President, I want to thank the members for their contribution, and to say to the member on the other side, I too agree with you, in this, I think I alluded to that, in this change in times, this new landscape of a world that we're living in. Sometimes the goalposts have been shifted, sometimes the playing field is not leveled, but that's the reality that we're faced, and I do agree in a lot of sense that we sometimes have to carry most of the burden. But as we both share, the consequences of not complying is greater than if we comply. And we want to ensure that we continue to comply to regulations and international treaties that we have signed. But Mr. President, we do all agree that with the onset of all the problems that the world has been faced with at this point in time, terrorist financing, money laundering and the likes, a lot of small island developing states seems to be the ones that is heavy eyes of scrutiny has been placed on. But we will continue to do what we have to do, and the nation will continue to arise and to meet its responsibility to its citizen, and will do what is necessary to ensure that the country continue to be a shining light in this part of the hemisphere. And in saying all of this, I'm saying it's to say that we will continue to comply with the international regulations that we've agreed to. With this, Mr. President, I commend the bill for its second reading.
To the contrary opinion, say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Mutual Exchange of Information on Taxation Matters Amendment Bill 2017.
Senator Gawi.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause.
Honorable members, the question is that this House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Honorable members, this House is now resolved in committee.
Clause 2, amendment to Section 3 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is, Clause 2, amendment to Section 3 of Principal Act forms part of the bill. All those who have that opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do in fact have it.
Clause 3, amendment to Section 5 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is, Clause 3, amendment to Section 5 of Principal Act forms part of the bill. All those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it.
Clause 4, amendment to Section 12 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question to be considered is Clause 4, amendment to Section 12 of the Principal Act to form part of this bill. All those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it.
Clause 5, amendment to Section 16 of Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question to be considered is Clause 5, amendment to Section 16 of Principal Act to form part of this bill. All those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it.
Clause 6, insertion of new Section 17A to Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 6, insertion of new Section 17A, the Principal Act, forms part of this bill. All those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it.
Clause 7, insertion of new Part 5 to Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is, Clause 7, insertion of new Part 5, the Principal Act, forms part of this bill. All those who have that opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do in fact have it.
Clause 8, insertion of new third schedule to Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is, Clause 8 forms part of the bill. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it.
Clause 9, amendment to Principal Act.
Honorable members, the question is, Clause 9, amendment to the Principal Act, forms part of this bill. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the
Aye.
contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do in fact have it.
Clause 1, short title and commencement.
Honorable members, the question is that Clause 1, short title and commencement, forms part of the bill. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary
Aye.
opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the Senate resumes and the chairman of the committee report progress on the bill.
Honorable members, the question is that the House resumes and that the chairman of the committee reports progress on the bill. Those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do in fact have it. Honorable members, this House now resumes. Honorable members, I have to report that a committee of the whole House considered the bill clause by clause without amendment. Senator Gawi.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the chairman's report be adopted.
Honorable members, the question is that the chairman's report be adopted. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The Honorable Senate resumes.
Mr. President, I beg to move the third reading of the bill.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill be ready third time. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be ready third time and pass. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Mutual Exchange of Information on Taxation Matters Amendment Bill 2017.
Senator the Honorable Nolan Cox.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I beg to introduce for first reading for a bill for an act shortly entitled Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Cooperation Agreement Bill 2017.
An act to provide for the implementation of the agreement establishing the Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Cooperation and for related matters, shortly entitled Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Cooperation Amendment Bill 2017.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the relevant standing orders of the Senate be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting.
Honorable members, the question is that the standing orders be suspended to enable this bill to be taken through all of its stages at this sitting. Those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do indeed have it. Senator Cox.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Before I proceed, Mr. President, I'd like to inform this House, as this is a money bill, I do have the certificate of the Speaker of the House of Representatives to proceed with this bill. Mr. President, the Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit
You need
Guarantee...
the authority of the Governor General. I'm assuming you have it as well.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
There are two elements to it: the certificate of the Speaker and the permission of the Governor General to proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, Mr. President, Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Cooperation Agreement Bill 2017.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a second time.
Thank you. Mr. President, this bill is an important bill. By way of background, this bill is a harmonization bill among members of the ECCU, that is the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, of which Grenada is a member. This bill seeks to incorporate the Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Cooperation Agreement into a cooperative.
Senator Cox, just a moment. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Senator Moses, is the air condition any better for you? Hello?
Yes,
Okay,
it's much
fine.
better.
All right. Proceed, Senator Cox. It's just that Senator Moses brought to my attention that the air condition was a bit too cold and was affecting her.
I understand it was a bit cold too, but I was just kind of practicing for the winter, so I choose not to say anything.
Okay. all
Yeah.
right.
Yes, Mr. President. This bill seeks to establish a credit guarantee cooperative within the ECCU, of which, as I indicated, that Grenada is a member of. It is important to note, Mr. President, that this bill has been agreed upon with an agreement, that is a credit guarantee agreement among all member states sometime in March of this year. I think the 2nd of March, this agreement was signed among ECCU member states. And it's a requirement as part of the agreement that this bill should come into law within all the ECCU member states on or before the end of June. Hence, the importance of us abiding by this agreement here by bringing this bill to this Honorable House. Mr. President, this agreement, by way of background, is one that is very important, I believe, for ECCU member states. ECCU member states recognizes the importance of micro, small, and medium-sized businesses and the importance that they have on our economies. They are serious economic components of our economies, and they do play a critical role in our socio-economic development. It is for this reason that this agreement was entered into, to create a facility, a credit guarantee facility, so that businesses within the member states can access this facility to help improve their business operations, to help improve the access to market, to expand wherever necessary, and in so doing would increase opportunities for job creation, of which is of very much importance to all our member states. Mr. President, this credit facility also provides an act as a risk mitigation for member states who previously would have taken their own to just maybe offer guarantee to some businesses. But this, currently, with this agreement, it will be done as one body, as one block. And this cooperation, Mr. President, will have representatives from all ECCU member states on this cooperative to ensure that we have oversight, proper oversight, and to ensure that whatever approvals that are made, it is done within the confines of the agreement and in the best interest of all member states who are signatories to this agreement. So, Mr. President, this, I believe, is a very important agreement. It is one where we're taking a new step in ensuring that we use this opportunity, use this agreement as a platform, as an avenue for also stabilizing our currency, because we operate under one currency union, and having that harmonized approach in terms of how we guarantee credit. I believe it's an important approach in doing so, to ensure that it's done not at the risk of one other putting the next country in risk, but it is done together, and to ensure that our currency stabilizes and that each country do operate in a way that their fiscal demands are not overstretched, but at the same time providing support for businesses and for each one of us economies to thrive in the OECS. In going directly to the bill, Mr. President, the bill has 12 clauses. Clause 3 provides for the agreement which is set out in the schedule, in which Grenada, of course, which we are working towards having this legislation passed, and so we can fulfill our consideration to this agreement by ensuring that this legislation come into law before the end of this month. Clause 4 provides for financial obligations under the agreement to be a charge on the consolidated fund, hence the reason why this bill is a money bill. There are going to be cost implications for us as member states in terms of implementing this agreement and this legislation. Clause 5 provides for Credit Guarantee Corporation to impose and to collect fees. This clause, Mr. President, will allow the corporation to impose fees on persons who may make requests for support through the facility, the credit facility, guarantee facility, or persons who may go or contravene the rules and regulations of the agreement in terms of breaking certain legislations or rules that is set out in the agreement. There may be cost implications for persons who may be lending or businesses that might be using the facility. Clause 6 provides for a credit guarantee threshold of 80%. And I think this is significant in that the party that is lending and has some implications in whatever loan that is issued under this facility. So the Credit Guarantee Corporation does not have 100% responsibility, but only 80%. So that other 20% of that risk is set with the lender. Clause 7 provides for annual audit accounts for the Credit Guarantee Corporation to be laid before Parliament as soon as practicable. This is important in terms of oversight to ensure that the records are kept and report to this Honorable House as it relates to the operations, the requests, approvals, denials, whatever that may occur through the operations of the Credit Guarantee Corporation over the year of operation. Clause 8 provides for sanction in the event that the Credit Guarantee Corporation or any of its agents fail to comply with requirements or contravenes prohibitions under the agreement. And we spoke about those fees that may be imposed for such earlier on. Clause 9 provides for the Credit Guarantee Corporation to be exempted from the application of Stamp Acts Cap 309 and Income Tax Act Cap 149. So the corporation would be exempted from stamp tax and income tax. They would not be paying those taxes. Clause 10 provides for amendment of the schedule to reflect amendment of this agreement. Clause 11 provides for the Minister of Finance to make regulations upon the recommendation of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. And this is important to note that this legislation was prepared by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, the ECC Union, in consultation with member states. So they would have an input into any such amendment that may be required as time sees fit, and that those recommendations will be channeled through member states' Minister of Finance, in which amendments will be made in corresponding parliaments and Senate to ensure that the law stays current and up to date. And Clause 12 provides for the conduct of affairs should, and the act for which this bill is to be suspended or repealed. This is an important section, is that it also indicates in this bill that if for some reason this act is suspended or repealed in any way, whatever current agreement that is approved or established ongoing, that would not affect that agreement, but it will allow for that agreement or that loan to run its approved term and for persons to recover the monies that were lent. So it provides a safety net in terms of persons. If for some reason the law is repealed, if there is a loan that is current, it does not in any way affect the lender from recovering their monies. So, Mr. President, I believe that this is a very good step in comparison to what previously happened, where countries in the ECCU individually would guarantee loans and not looking at the implications that it may have on the currency, the implications it may have on the central bank, but doing it collectively as a union, as one currency union, I believe is a step in the right direction. There may be some gaps, there may be some areas for improvement, but the legislation allows for that to take place through the bank and through the Ministry of Finance for each member state, and to ensure that we go forward. But it's important to note, and I do hope the business community see this and receive this as an opportunity for them to expand and to help develop and to create more opportunities for us in our economy, and also to take into account that we do have a serious demand for employment by all persons within the ECCU, with all states. We do have a challenge with unemployment, and I believe that this initiative can create an opportunity for creating more jobs through our micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise by taking access of this facility where that certain loans would be guaranteed on behalf of the government to ensure that they do the necessary in terms of nation building and building our economy. So with this, Mr. President, I want to take this opportunity to say and to offer again this bill for a second reading in this honorable House. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Cox. Senator, the Honorable Christy Ali.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the private sector is, of course, in support of the bill. Why do we support the bill? Mr. President, we, for a long time in the private sector and the regional private sector, as a matter of fact, appreciate the fact that micro, small, and medium-sized businesses are the engines of our rural economy, the rural side of the economy, in terms of generating employment, generating economic activity. So it is critical for them to be alive, for them to encourage entrepreneurship in that area, and facilitate growth and expansion. The problem they had, small, micro, and medium business, is that the access to financing was always problematic. It was problematic from a couple points. The first point is they couldn't get the relevant cost of financing to be affordable enough to support the nature of their business. The risks through the traditional financial institutions like banks and so on was too high for these financial institutions to support microlending. So there was very little access to financing that was available to these different types of mom and pop, as we would normally call them, type businesses. So there was a problem within the ECCU region. Central Bank looked at it, and we believed that one of the ways out and to offer additional financing was through this credit guarantee scheme. The credit guarantee scheme, Mr. President, works through the traditional financial institutions. What it does is that it says to these financial institutions, we reduce the risk that you have by guaranteeing the loans that you will extend to these businesses, so that if they were to go bad, we take it up as the corporation. An excellent move. We can't criticize that because it helps to get these businesses to the point where they could access these funds and access them probably quicker than they normally would. The other problem we had, Mr. President, with businesses of that nature is a couple of things. That, first of all, there was a lot of red tape involved in accessing funds through traditional institutions apart from the developmental banks. And not all of our countries have functioning and development banks that could really go out there and extend credit and do the things that was necessary. So we had issues there. So there was a lot of administrative work in getting funds to these small businesses. And the hope is with the establishment of this Credit Guarantee Corporation that the red tape, the so-called red tape that these businesses traditionally would have to get funding is going to be reduced. The one thing I didn't see here, and I hope that it will come in the regulations, because the bill through Clause 11 makes provisions for the Minister of Finance to make regulations attached to this bill, is that we still have, at that level, at the micro, small level, the ability for these businesses to prepare proper business plans. So regardless of where you go, because this is true, this funding is supposed to go through traditional funding institutions, but to reduce the risk to them. So you still have to come as a small and micro, two-man business, three-man business, prepare a business plan to come to these organizations to access the funds and to say that the project that you are doing is worthwhile of being funded. And that is something that needs to be done. This bill doesn't provide for how we try and access that, whether it's through our developmental banks, whether it's through training to different areas, or what assistance we can give in that area. How do we get them to prepare a proper business plan? The second thing it doesn't address is that most of these mom-and-pop businesses do not have systems in place to monitor what they do. So a lot of them will produce a bottle of pepper sauce, but they don't really understand the cost going in to produce a bottle of pepper sauce, and then how they price. So eventually what you find happening, Mr. President, is that a lot of these businesses don't price properly because they don't understand the cost structure. And as a result, the need for working capital sometimes is underestimated or overestimated, and it costs them. And so the rate at which they expand sometimes is stymied because this issue is not properly addressed. So they don't have access probably to a proper system that could tell them, listen, if I produce one box of clove, what that costs me, really and truly, and how I should really price it. A lot of them just look at pricing on the market and they say, okay, I drop 50 cents below the competition and they think that is adequate. And sometimes that is never adequate enough. You know, Mr. President, I had a complaint the other day about that. That a farmer that come to me and said that marketing board doesn't pay him nothing for his tomatoes. And I said to him, well, what it costs you to produce a pound of tomato? And he couldn't answer. But you know marketing board wasn't paying him enough. Well, how you know that? If you don't understand how much it was costing you. And that is a simple example of where we are at that level with these businesses. And that is a part of the thing that I can hope I could see us address through some mechanism, not necessarily through the corporation, but some extension or some arm that we could set up and say, of the $30 million that we're looking to capitalize this corporation by, can we put some mechanism in place that offers guidance and training through the regulations, obviously, and part of the funding, that we can have people go out to these businesses and give them the appropriate training, set up the appropriate systems, so that their continuity can be secured in the future, and that they could get the relevant funding that they need as this is providing for. And again, the 80% is a high threshold. It shows that they have to have some skin in the game, both sides, and we have no issues with that. So I say this, Mr. President, that from a private sector point of view, we're happy to see this coming as an additional type of funding that can provide access to these small, micro, and medium businesses, and I hope that they are able to take advantage of it if they have the necessary systems and processes in place and relevant things to do the projects that they need to do so that they can access the funding. Because there's no sense having the funding available or putting in the system to mitigate the risks for the financial institutions, and they can't get it because we're back to the same old problem. We can't prepare a proper project, and we have no systems and procedures in place to monitor when we get this money, how we're doing or how we're not doing. I thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Diari. Senator, the Honorable Pamela Moses, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I stand in support of the Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Corporation Bill. It is indeed good to know that the Eastern Caribbean Bank is involved in this venture to provide small business loan to Caribbean countries. This, of course, will filter down to our young people who would be able to access loans. We are in the process of encouraging young people to come together and form cooperatives in which they can be a stronger force going forward in accessing those loans so that they can form strong businesses. This is indeed a good time. As we know, our public service is quite saturated. We must indeed promote such ventures and support these bills that would enable and encourage the stimulation of business within the economy. And it is for this reason I commend this bill to its second reading.
Senator Moses. Honorable members, Senator Cox.
Mr. President, thank you very much. I wish to thank fellow colleagues for contributing on this important legislation. I wish to take the opportunity to respond to the member representing the business community who has made an important and valuable suggestion in terms of ensuring that persons who are receiving support under this credit guarantee facility do have the capacity necessary to ensure that those resources or monies that they're receiving that are going to be used and returns are going to be received on those investments. But I believe that we do have some support systems within the state. It's just a matter for the regulations to accede to that. Like, for example, we have the Greater Industrial Development Corporation who do provide support in terms of small businesses, in terms of building the capacity, in terms of business plan preparation, and so forth, all the necessary stuff and guidance in terms of establishing a business, having a business registered. I know that the GIDC do provide that support, Mr. President. So we take that suggestion on board. Just a matter for us in terms of developing the regulation that will use those facilities that we have to ensure the success of this credit guarantee facility. I believe the board itself, the directors of the corporation, will definitely have those critical issues assessed in terms of issuing or approving persons who are requesting support under this credit guarantee facility. So it's a very important issue that you raise, and we welcome that in the spirit of ensuring that we do what is best for our country, whatever legislation that we put forward to make sure that we get the best for our people. Mr. President, with this, I come in this bill for second reading.
The question is that the bill be read a second time. Honorable members, the question is that the Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Corporation Agreement Bill 2017 be read a second time. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Cooperation Agreement Bill 2017.
Mr. President, I beg to move the third reading of the bill.
Honorable members, this is a money bill, as was indicated before, so there's no need for us to go to the committee. And therefore, I will put the question. Honorable members, the question is that the Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Cooperation Agreement Bill 2017 be read for a third time. Honorable members, the question is that the bill be read for a third time and passed. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it.
A bill for an act shortly entitled Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Cooperation Agreement Bill 2017.
Senator,
Thank you, Mr.
the
President.
Honorable Brenda Hood.
I beg to move for, Mr. President, just one moment. Mr. President, I beg to move for second reading of the bill, the Grenada National Museum Bill 2017. This bill
Yes.
was presented in April, and I did the first reading at that time. So
Yes.
we are doing the second and final reading today.
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you. There was just one brief oversight in respect of
Yes.
Standing Order number 48, and I could understand why. At that time when we took the bill only for its first reading and not through all its stages, it wasn't indicated at that time when the next sitting was going to be, because we were going to afford public comment and engagement on that bill. So there's a slight oversight there in respect of Standing Order 48, which reads as follows: subject to the provision of this standing order, at the conclusion of the proceedings on any stage of a bill, the senator in charge of the bill may either name the next sitting or such subsequent sitting to be appointed for the next stage of the bill, or move that the next stage of the bill be taken forthwith. So there was a slight oversight. In my opinion, I don't see any irreversible or any damages that can be done, and therefore I'd allow the process to continue. But just for us to be aware that the next time we take in a bill only through its partial stage, we should announce on the next occasion when that should be taken. So you can proceed, Senator, but I just thought I should bring this to your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I agree that was an oversight, but it was quite difficult for us to say when was the next sitting of the Senate.
Yes. Understood.
Okay, thank you. Mr. President, I rise today again to present this National Museum bill. Mr. President, the last time when this, the first reading was done here in the Senate, I did say that we would have consultations on the bill before it went through all its stages. I'm pleased to report that we did have consultation on the National Museum bill, and this was held about a month and a half ago at the National Museum. There were over 60 persons attending the consultation, and there were a lot of interesting suggestions and recommendations made. The fact that there were so many persons in attendance tells me that there is interest for the preservation of a national museum. And I was very pleased that we were able to meet with those persons. We are hoping also, Mr. President, as you are aware, for us to meet as a Senate grouping to discuss the bill and before we came to this place. However, we didn't have the numbers to do this, and this is why we were not able to meet with the senators in a closed room. But I'm happy that we are here today to present this National Museum bill and to say to the persons who are listening out there that the National Museum Bill 2017 is important to all of us. we believe that the time has come for us to have a national museum in our country that we all can be proud of. Mr. President, it was the former Prime Minister, Sir Eric Matthew Gairy, who felt it was necessary at that time that we should have a national museum for the people of Grenada. As a matter of fact, this came up at a time when he was also talking about the Easter Parade. As a result, Mr. President, the former Prime Minister put a committee of persons together to plan for the development of the National Museum. Chairing that committee was Dr. James Deverpitt, and comprising of others like Manny Lewis, Gertrude Protein, Leon Wilder, and Beresford Wilcox. There were other persons involved in that subcommittee. I do not have the names, but there are many persons who assisted. The Ministry of Tourism was very involved at that time. And on April 9th, 1976, the National Museum was opened. The doors were open here in St. George's. Mr. President, the reasons for the Grenada Museum Bill is such. The current Company Act does not create a national museum, and I believe this is the structure that they have been using, nor does it cater for a progressional director, an appropriate board of directors, policy development, transparent financial management, membership, sustainability, and the overall enhancement of the museum. The museum has been around for 41 years. This new legislation, Mr. President, will lay the foundation for the change that is needed for the next 40 years. We don't want 40 years down the road when our children and our grandchildren are around for them to say, why didn't they put the proper structures in place? This didn't happen. We are not going back. We are going forward. And this is why we are here. And this is why the government is adamant that we must put structures in place to make sure that our National Museum is a museum that we all can be proud of. The legislation will create the necessary foundations from which the museum can acquire property, raise necessary funds, seek technical assistance, and work with international institutions to better serve the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. The current structure of the board of directors has not worked, and a new structure is needed to be put in place to make sure that appropriate skilled persons, board members, work for the interests of the museum. And when I speak later on about the bill in terms of the different clauses, you would hear about the structure of the board members and why it is important that these are the persons that will be members of the board. By passing this new legislation, Mr. President, the government of Grenada is taking a firm stance on the preservation and promotion of the island's heritage for our children and their children. And we're talking about tangible and intangible cultural heritage. This legislation will create a solid foundation from which the museum will grow to become what its founders had set out to do, make a truly national museum that will be sustainable and a success in carrying out its goals. The legislation will create a permanent home for Grenada's culture and heritage. I must say at this point, Mr. President, that we, the government, and I'm certain a lot of people here in the country, appreciate the work of Dr. Pitt and his family for the years that they have struggled at the National Museum and the other members of the board. They have been there in struggling times, under difficult situations. We appreciate what they have done over the years and want to say to the family of Dr. Pitt, unfortunately he's not here today to hear this presentation, but I know prior to him passing, I met with him a few times at his home, and he knew that government had plans for the development of the museum. Mr. President, I want to say on behalf of the government and people of Grenada, we appreciate the work that they have done, but the time has come to move the museum at a higher level, and this is what it's all about. We will continue to appreciate what they have done, what he has done in particular, and to say to the family that his work will not be treated in a way that no one will know what he has done. He will be recognized for the work he has done for the National Museum. The legislation was 2 years in the making. It didn't just happen last week or last year. Over the past 2 years, we have been going back and forth, consulting with different persons, trying to make sure whatever we do is in the best interest. And this is why I'm so happy today that I'm here to finally present the National Museum. Mr. President, this bill seeks to establish the Grenada National Museum, as I have indicated. The bill contains 6 parts and 24 clauses. Clause 2 provides for the establishment of the National Museum as a body, corporate, and statutory body, and contains 3 to 11 clauses. Clause 6 provides for the establishment of a board to manage the National Museum, to provide respectively for the functions and powers of the board. Clause 9 and 10 provides respectively for the appointment of a director of the National Museum by the minister with responsibility for culture, and the appointment of a secretary of the National Museum by the board. Clause 11 provides for the composition and expertise of individuals which should compose the board. So what we are doing, Mr. President, is making sure that the persons who will be sitting on the board are persons with institutional memory, are persons who have the skills and the knowledge, people who are competent, and people who have an interest in making sure that the National Museum grows from strength to strength. Clause 12, 13, and 14 provide for the assets of the National Museum, the manner in which funds of the National Museum must be kept, and the manner in which the funds must be used. So we're talking about accountability and transparency. Whatever is happening at the National Museum will be done in a way that we all can be proud of. It also, Clause 18, provides for the National Museum to borrow funds. Oh, okay. The Clause 16 provides for the museum to have proper records. So you can go back after many years and you will see what the records are, how much money it took you to operate the museum, what were the salaries of staff, volunteers, and everything else. All that information has to be recorded. Clause 20 provides for the National Museum to prepare and submit to the Minister with responsibility for culture an annual budget and quarterly reports. The Minister is empowered to give policy directions to the board in respect of the performance of the National Museum. Clause 22 provides for the procedure for mandatory reporting or discovery of whatever artifacts that we have. We have to preserve and we have to protect our artifacts. We know over the years what has happened. I know when we had a consultation a few weeks ago, there were persons at the consultation who were complaining of so much of our artifacts have left our country because we haven't had the legislation for the protection. I want to say here this afternoon that with the National Museum there will be legislations in place to make sure that we preserve, and people do not just pick up and leave our country with our artifacts. It belongs to the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, and it should remain here. It should not be sold to people. It should not be used, taken abroad, where they can benefit economically from it. And this is what people have done over the years. And we are saying enough is enough. We have to protect our heritage. We have to protect our heritage. We have to do what is necessary. We will not, as a government, if we didn't do this, we will not go down in history as someone who cared and were concerned about our heritage and our culture. Mr. President, I must say that at this point in time, I believe that the function of the National Museum is something that we all should be proud of. And I would read a few of the functions of the museum. The functions of the National Museum shall be to establish up and administer, oversee museums in the state of Grenada. As we are aware, there are other museums here in Grenada. There are museums in Carriacou, and the National Museum will have an oversight over all of those museums. So we are not saying that these museums should be shut down. What we are saying is we are going to be putting standards to make sure whatever we have is of a high quality. I have traveled all over the world, only close to Barbados not too long ago. And I went to the National Museum there, and I was so impressed with what I have seen. And we want to make sure that we begin to put the process in place. Whoever is there to make it happen, we should make sure it happens. Because not only you have a National Museum, you have a building with artifacts, but there are revenue that can be generated, employment opportunities that can be created, and this is what it's all about. So we see it as economically viable once the structures are in place, and we are doing what is necessary so all of us can be proud. The National Museum will maintain and provide access to the national collection in accordance with the National Collections Policy. They will increase and communicate the knowledge of the natural and human history of Grenada by research, exhibits, publications, and other means. Currently, over the past years, the museum had some research, they had exhibitions going. But what we are saying, we need to move it at a higher level. We need to standardize it. We need to be more professional in what we are doing, and this is what it's going to be all about with the National Museum. Mr. President, over the past weeks, I've been speaking with individuals who have an interest in the museum, and I've received a lot of positive in terms of people are saying that this is the way to go. We want to make sure that a museum is a facility that provides the necessary information for our people. Our children should be able to go to the museum and see what is available, have a better understanding. We are supposed to preserve what we have, and this is what it's all about. Funds and resources of the National Museum. The funds and resources of the museum, first of all, money is allocated by Parliament and such amounts as the government may advance from general revenues by way of subvention or otherwise. So the museum will receive a subvention for its operations because it cannot function without any funds. So it will come to Parliament when you do your budget allocation through the ministry, and monies will be set aside for the operations of the museum. Property can be vested in the National Museum. Funds and donations can be given by way of gifts, grant or otherwise to the National Museum. Some borrow, they can also borrow. They have the power to borrow as long as this request is made through the Ministry of Finance. Funds may be applied in defraying the following expenses: acquisition and care of historical and cultural material, the remuneration, fees, and allowances of members of the board, because as you know, most boards here get a small stipend. It's not a salary, they get a stipend. So members of the board will receive a stipend. Maintenance, upgrading, and protection of the property belonging to the National Museum, attendance of members of the board or the appropriate members of staff to conferences and workshops, and any other expenditure that the museum may have. They also have the borrowing power that the museum can borrow depending on what is required. They have that power to do so. Their books will be audited by the auditor, so they have to keep proper accounts. And I believe this is the way to go. We cannot continue the way it used to be. We are going forward, so we are putting structures in place. I just want to spend a few minutes to talk about the board and the persons who will be on the board, so that persons listening will have an understanding. They said the board, there shall be a board of the National Museum in which management, control, and administration of the National Museum shall be vested. The board shall make policy directives for the manner in which the functions of the National Museum are to be performed. They have to develop policy. They have to deliver, receipt. They have to withdraw, dispose, review of any other public records. They have the power to do that. They can have exhibition. They have to keep proper booking of all that is there. They have to make sure that whatever they do is in the best interest of the museum. In terms of a director of the museum, there shall be a director of the National Museum. The director of the National Museum shall be appointed by the minister on such terms and conditions, including salaries, allowances, and other remuneration as the minister may determine. And whenever we talk about the minister, because I know that always raises some eyebrows here when they talk about the minister and the role of the minister. And the minister is the minister in cabinet. So it's a decision. So the minister may have a recommendation, but if our other members feel that is not in the best interest, then they will so decide. So it's a collective decision that is made whenever they mention the minister here. It's not just one person making a decision. The qualifications of the board. I'm saying all of this, Mr. President, because it is very clear what we would like to see and what is written here. And once it becomes legislation, it means it has to be enforced. It has to be implemented. Members of the board shall be selected based on the following expertise. A, technical or scholarly expertise relevant to the collection and interpretation of historical, natural, and cultural material. B, public law, company law, or intellectual property law. C, qualifications or adequate knowledge in history, the natural sciences, or heritage management. D, technical knowledge in the field of the visual and performing arts, qualifications in accounting or marketing and fundraising experience, or qualification or experience relating to the functions, operations, and management of museums, archives, and analogous institutions. Mr. President, as I say, I believe that this museum, the time has come, and today is the day that it will be passed in the Senate. I believe that there is still a lot of work to be done, but I believe with the support and the board once elected and the persons involved, we all will be proud as Grenadians for this National Museum that I'm passing here today. So on this point, Mr. President, I want to commend the bill for a second reading.
The Honorable Ray Roberts, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will not be long, very short. Mr. President, clearly the museum bill provides safeguards and sets standards that we as a people must appreciate. Artifacts and the things we treasure, we clearly need to protect them so that succeeding generations can have a sense of value of how our society evolved from one generation to another. So without any doubt, we in the workers' movement appreciate the fact that we need that kind of structure. But Mr. President, the minister touched exactly what I think is bad for the bill. Mr. President, I would say to the minister, through you, would say to the Honorable Minister, that the reason why we have had a museum that has evolved and has developed over the 41 years, it is because the people who were in charge, they were passionate about it, very passionate. And I'm delighted to hear that you have commended the Pitt family for the dignified way in which they have maintained and ensured that museum is at a level where it is today. Mr. President, what bothers me is the minister, cabinet, the minister/cabinet will have the power to choose the director of the museum. Mr. President, you have sat here. You have been involved in Grenada active politics and social life for a long time. I'm not saying that in any way to ask you to agree with what I'm saying. But I'm saying to us here that governments over the years have displayed, to me, poor management skills in managing institutions of the level of the museum, statutory bodies. And what we are doing by inserting that section is giving the minister, the cabinet, the politicians an opportunity to direct the show from inside of the cabinet. The director of the museum, clearly, he will be the live wire. He will be the engine. He or she will have that power to make things happen. And I believe he or she will be better selected by the board of directors. If you have trust in the board of directors, give them that responsibility. The mere fact that you have identified sources from which a board will come from, why take that mandate from them? Mr. President, it is clear that you will have had some kind of credibility in these people, and here you are undermining these people by you taking the most important area for yourself and leaving them to appoint secretaries and other members of staff. I mean, I would think the first thing is you must have a board that feels comfortable with the CEO or manager. If the board does not have that comfort, clearly things will not function as they ought to be. So I am saying to you, Madam Minister, through the distinguished President and the leader of government business, you ought to relook that section of the legislation. Grenada and the museum will be better served if that CEO is selected by the board itself. And I also want to add that to it. This government, no difference from any other government, they use that position, or that position of power, to select somebody who has served the party well, somebody who the party needs to reward. I mean, it's not only in Grenada. I said that here already, and let me repeat it. In a sister OECS country, they wanted a CEO of the CBI. People with PhD applied, masters, bachelors. The man who got it had a high school diploma, but he was an entrenched member of the party. So I am saying, I hope that doesn't happen here, but I'm not putting it beyond us. So that's why I am appealing to the other side through our distinguished president that you rethink this process. It will not take anything away from you. The second point I want to make here, Mr. President, again, the board of directors. I like the fact that you have documented areas of qualification. But I would want to say to you, as I look through, I'm not seeing some of the organizations that have really championed the preservation of Grenada's history and culture and everything else. Where's the Willie Redhead Foundation in this? Whether we like it or not, they have been the most visible group in this country. In the last, well, I knew the man who founded the group, the late Willie Redhead. I mean, he was the authority. When I was in school, I could have called him and he gave me information on everything. That organization, the Willie Redhead Foundation, should have been documented in the bill as one of the groups we would have selected a representative from. The same thing I'm saying about IAGDO. And there's another one we'll call Citizens in Defense of the Homeland. I think we have heard from these people over the years. We may not like some of the things they are saying. They have joined in supporting Cameron Park, in asking to preserve many things in Grenada, which government may not like. But the point is, their passion cannot be challenged. Now I see we have from the Ministry of Education, and nothing wrong with it, the Spice Mass Corporation and other government institutions. I have served on board, and I'm telling you, no doubt about it. Ministries often send people who show up and they tell you, I've been sent by the PS. And I think I heard my friend on this side said recently, there are people who you have served on board with. They come, they have never asked a question, they have never said anything in the meeting apart from the stipend. No, I am not saying that will happen here, but I'm saying we should protect ourselves by identifying institutions that over the years served Grenada with a passion. And I'm sure we have enough when it comes to the museum. We can find a board of 9 people who will do everything the government desires without the government having to pick anyone. So, Mr. President, I hope what I'm saying is not falling on deaf ear. We in the workers' movement see the need for what the minister said. You must have a structure, you must have a design, you must have rules and regulations as to how our treasures, I call them our treasures, are being used and who take them out and who bring them in. But clearly, we're going to defeat the purpose if we are going to have the government playing that role. It's not often we have ministers who may be passionate about seeing the right people on the board. Some ministers may see it as, look, as they see sports sometimes, well, it's a recreation, it's a game. And I'm saying to preserve what we're thinking of, the best thing would be to look for people who are passionate, and the people who are passionate, we could identify the organizations that they represent. With those few words, Mr. President, I thank you for the opportunity.
Roberts. Senator, the Honorable Pamela Moses.
Mr. President, I rise in support of this bill, the museum bill. And I am convinced here, knowing my fellow senator as the one who is, bringing back the museum and reestablishing things, I know that she's very passionate about the museum, about the future and history of the Grenadian people. So I have firm belief that good, passionate people like herself would be selected to supervise and to be members of the board of the museum. We must safeguard our history, Mr. President. It really does, give good direction to the next generation. Our young people need to understand the way of life, and they need to have an avenue in which they can appreciate the contributions that would have been made by their foreparents. We know that in the museum there would be lots of valuable pieces, artifacts, and so we know that it can bring revenue to the country. We must and we have to reestablish our museum for that reason, so that our people can see what it was like living back then. We are forgetting what a coal pot iron used to be like. We no more remember what typewriter used to be. There's so much things. Very soon, a lot of different, the mortar and the pestle, those things will be forgotten. And it is critical that we understand how people live their lives before. And so, I just want to say a quote that was written by Marcus Garvey. He said that a people without knowledge of their past, history, of their origin and culture is like a tree without roots. And so it is indeed for that reason that I commend this bill to its second reading.
Winston Garvey.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to give my full support to the second reading of the museum bill. And specifically, I just want to capture the function of the National Museum as is recorded here in section 4. But permit me, Mr. President, just to recap a little. A few years ago, I had the occasion to visit a museum in China. And when I got there, my appreciation for history, although I was still considered to be a student of history, my appreciation for history, the national history, was enlightened and enhanced. When I look at all that was preserved within the space called the museum, I felt a sense of pride knowing that Grenada has its own. And knowing that you can continue to perpetuate love for a place by the mere fact that people have access to recreating the past by visiting a museum and looking at the artifacts. And I was transfixed within this museum in China, looking at all the history. And there I said, I wish probably I could get one Chinese historian to come and do some work with our own local museum authorities to develop and create that same sort of effect that I have experienced. And today we are about to pass this museum bill, and I am in a sense of pride. I'm seeing how much we will be able to continue to perpetuate the history that has made us a people of Grenada, CARICOM, Petite Martinique famous, proud, and resilient. In Section 4, it said the function of the National Museum shall be to establish, operate, administer, and oversee museum in the state of Grenada. To secure, receive, preserve, hold, and display specimens, artifacts, and other materials that illustrate the natural or human history of Grenada. And there is a lot of history that is lying around in our country. We have seen many research teams come here and will dig for artifacts. I want to ensure, and this bill I presume, Mr. President, what I know will ensure that the artifacts, the rich heritage of this country will be preserved.
Deputy President in the chair.
So, Mr. Deputy President, I am extremely happy today that herein lies the authority to ensure that our rich heritage, our artifacts, yes, our history is preserved. Preserved for the next generation and next generation and generations to come. I remember those days as a young lad, driving over the hills on what we used to call bus tour, a field trip. And entering into the museum and to see those artifacts that was on display, how much it brought back a sense of gratitude. This is an excellent piece that is before us today, because it will help our young people and the students, our upcoming students, to appreciate this, our country, to appreciate the work that our forefathers have done to preserve this heritage, to appreciate the work of our father of independence and the stories we've heard of the Caribs and the Arawaks and all those stories. The museum will capture this and bring back that sense of pride. But most of all, to instill within our people that appreciation and value for that which is ours. That appreciation and value for that which is Grenadian. That when we travel wherever and we see something that marks Grenada, we will look to even capture it and to have it within that our museum establishment. I close by saying a friend from the United States came down about 2 years ago, and he brought me a world atlas from, I think it was 1840. And what it captured is a picture of Grenada and information about the picture. And he thought, I will appreciate this. And Mr. Deputy President, he didn't know how much he made me feel proud of something that old, reminding me of a place in Grenada that bears some significance. And I want to say in closing that this here, I believe, will help our people to continue to show great pride and respect for this, our homeland. With this, I give my support, Mr. Deputy President, for the second reading of this bill.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. Mr. Deputy President, I just want to thank each one of the members who made their contribution, worthwhile contribution, invaluable contribution to the passage of this bill, and to say to the other member on the other side, he's not there, but to let him know that we will be very conscious in terms of these elections of persons to sit on the board, because we are making a statement. We are saying that we can do it the right way. We are saying that we want persons who are capable. I want to also assure him and to assure the public that within the board of the National Museum, committees can be formed. And what they have said is there'll be 9 members on the board of trustees of the National Museum, but each one of them can be on a committee and they can bring in other persons to be on the committee. So there is room for so many people who would like to help. Because at a National Museum, most of the time, you have lots of volunteers that go in there and put their time and effort, and this is